You, good sir, might have been playing KSP recently and maybe wanting to land on Duna. And for the life of you, you cannot. Well, you found me and I'm going to show you exactly how it's done. Starting out, you want to go into your tracking station, zoom out, and find Duna, the little red one right there, as you can see. You want to speed up time, make sure Kerbal is going to be facing behind it. Around that area, this is generally where you want to be for when you transfer to Duna. Now what we want to do is we want to go to the VAB, the Vehicle Assembly Building area, where we will build our amazing rocket to get to Duna. Now, one of the first things you want to do when grabbing this is you want to grab the PD-12, and then you want to grab the Mark II lander can, as you can see right there. Now, you want to grab a Mark 16 parachute as well, and then on top of that, you want to get 4 Mark 12 drogue parachutes. Now, we will be moving on to our signs and antennas, so you want to grab this MG20 antenna, and then once you have put that on, you want to grab your mystery goo, as you can see right there. We want to rotate it and then make sure it's not inside of it, so just do that. And then next, we will then move on to our barometer, which is for the atmosphere. We'll then do our gravioli detector, which is gravity, obviously, and then our seismic accelerometer, which is for earthquakes and stuff. Now, as you can see there, they're just floating. So you can press 2 on your keyboard and then you can just slightly lower them so they don't look silly and a bit more realistic. Our last science equipment is the magnometer, which is for the magnetosphere of the planet. So as you can see there, fully extended, looking wonderful. Now it's time for electricity. Now you want to grab some solar panels and put them on your ship. Once you have placed your solar panels, we will then move on to our fuel tanks. As you can see there, they look lovely when extended, but we will grab 2 of these little ones, and then we'll grab the poodle engine right there. What you want to do next is grab these little structural pylons right here, and then press W to flip them like that. And then we can then add our LT2 landing legs, which are these ones right here. You can also flip them and make sure they are not extended. What you want to do now is you want to do your coupling and heat shield. So you want to add the heat shield and then the coupling. So there we go. So when we enter Kerbal's atmosphere, when we return, we won't burn to a crisp. Now what we want to do is we want to do our ladders. So ignore that I have 4 there. We're just going to make sure we have 1. And then we're going to grab this little one that can actually extend and unextend. Now, make sure that while the ladder is extended, we will have enough room to actually jump up and get to the ladder. But now what we will do, we will add some dome lights to the bottom here. So as you can see there, we've got 4 of them. So what you can do is you press 2 on your keyboard and actually just move them. So they're like that. Then you can press 3 on your keyboard and we can make them face outwards a little bit. The whole idea of these dome lights is that if we have to land on the dark side of Duna, we will actually be able to see and we won't crash into the ground at 100 meters a second. Now, as you can see there, for some reason it had coupling, but what you can do is you can right click it and then you can disable the coupling on it. What you want to do next is you want to grab the 10-meter heat shield and then get our coupling, put it there, and our fairing. So now what we'll do is we'll make it go out wide a bit, just like that, so nothing's sticking through. And make sure it's nice and aerodynamic because Kerbal Space Program actually has aerodynamics. I know, pretty cool, isn't it? Our next step is to move on to the fuel tank. So go to your fuel tab and grab the S3 1800 fuel tank, which is this one right here. We then want to get the Corgi engine, which is like the Poodle's big brother. And then we will now do our decouplers. So we'll just add that one there. And then we have another fuel tank we need to grab, which is the S3 14400. You want to grab 2 of those. Okay. Now, move the ship upwards a little bit and then move on to your 4-booster Mammoth engine, which will be this one right here. Now, what we will do, and then what you want to do is you want to grab the hydraulic detachment manifold, which will be this one right here with 450 ejection force. Once you've put 4 of these on, we'll move on to the Pollux solid rocket booster, which is this little one here. Now, what we will do is zoom in and make sure that it's actually out as much as possible, and then the decoupler itself, we will move down to make sure that it is in line with the engines right there, as you can see. Now, the next step for us is we need to move on to our aerodynamics and wings. So we'll grab this Delta Deluxe winglet, as you can see right there. And then once we've put that on, we will then move on to our RCS thrusters. once you have put on your RCS thrusters, make sure they're not clipped in, just like that. And then we will then move on to our launch stability enhancers, which will be our little legs for when we're about to take off, basically. Now, the last step for us is we will then move on to our staging. So as you can see on the bottom right of the screen, you'll see something that kind of looks like a ladder. If you built your ship similar to how you built mine, by the end of what I'm about to show you, it should look relatively similar. So as you can see, I'm just figuring out the staging at the top here. The bottom staging was relatively good, but we will move the drogue parachutes around. So the drogue parachutes will deploy first, and then the main parachutes will deploy after that. Now the finished product is here. Take a moment to pause the video and make sure that your staging looks very similar to mine. As you could see, I just added another engine real quick just to give it a bit more delta V. Now the last step for us, we will now move on to actually launching the ship. So as you can see there, make sure that we have our three boys, Jebediah, Bill and Bob. And now it is time for us to launch this ship. Alrighty, now make sure SAS and RCS are turned on. We will be launching right now. Now, what you're going to want to do is just start pressing D every so often on your keyboard to get your ship to start turning. As you can see there on the little nav ball in the bottom middle of the screen, I am slowly increasing my angle so that we do not just go straight up and we can actually get into a nice orbit. So as you can see, we are getting a bit higher in the atmosphere, so you can actually turn down your main thrusters a little bit. Your solid rocket thrusters will be at 100% no matter what. Now, as you can see, our solid rocket thrusters have actually just run out of fuel completely. What we will do is speed up and go into the thinner atmosphere, so we're close to space, and then disperse of them just like that. Now we can actually go to 100% throttle and actually get into a nice orbit trajectory. Our apoapsis should be around 80,000 kilometers. 80,000 meters. What we will do next is we will then move on to doing our maneuver node to get into a nice orbit. You will place a maneuver node on the apoapsis marker, and then pull the prograde marker until you see the periapsis pop up on the other side. Once you see it pop up, you want to keep pulling the prograde marker until you see the apoapsis and periapsis, the two yellow ones, flip and then go into the middle. Just like that. Our next step is to speed up time and set our maneuver node and begin our burn to get into a nice stable orbit around Kerbal. Now, once you have finished the burn, right click on your fairing and then press deploy to make the ship a little bit lighter. Now, what we will do is we will now move on to the trajectory and maneuver node of actually getting to Duna. So as you can see on the top right of your screen, you'll actually see an example of where your trajectory should be heading when it comes to going to Duna. So as you can see, there are two little blue arrows, and you just have to mess around with the prograde marker until you see that you actually get an intercept. It is now time for us to start heading towards the maneuver node, so make sure your ship is pointed towards it, and then speed up time, and we will shortly begin our burn. Now that your burn is complete, we can then move on to deploying our solar panels so we actually have electricity. Make sure your antennas are also deployed as we'll want connection to Kerbal when we go further away from the planet. The next step for us is we will then move on to going into our map and focusing view on Duna. Once you have done that, we will set a maneuver node to about halfway, and then we will then zoom into Duna, and you'll want to mess around with your prograde and retrograde markers, as well as the purple normal and anti-normal markers, until you see that you're in a relatively stable orbit or an orbital trajectory around Duna. So as you can see, we are slowly getting closer by messing around with those anti-normal and normal markers, as well as the prograde and retrograde markers. You can also use your scroll wheel to do micro adjustments, which will come in very, very handy because sometimes your mouse cannot do the adjustments quite as small. So what we want to do is we'll actually want to get around 15 to 20,000 meters, because we will be aero burning to save fuel when it comes to getting into an orbit around Duna. Once you have done everything as shown, we will then point our ship towards the maneuver node and once again speed up time and make our way to the maneuver node. Now that we are closer to the maneuver node, we will then right click on the engine and set our thrust limiter to only a couple percent. Now what we need to do is actually start the burn. Once you get close to almost finishing the burn, you want to press X on your keyboard and then press Shift, so we're only using our throttle a little bit. As you can see, we are slowly making our maneuver go towards the little purple line. As you can see, we are around the 17,000 meter mark, which is pretty good for getting into a nice aero burn to get us into an orbit without using any fuel around Duna. Now this is a mod that I have, so it might be a bit more difficult for you, but as you can see, my maneuver node was actually too close in the atmosphere, so we need to set another maneuver node and use the radial in and radial out markers to make sure that we don't crash into the planet. Now, if you didn't make the same mistakes as me, this is where you should be. You should be heading on a decent aero burn trajectory into Duna's atmosphere. Make sure all of your solar panels and antennas are retracted so they don't fall off when we enter the atmosphere to get into an orbit around Duna. We have successfully gotten to an orbit around Duna without using any fuel whatsoever. Now, once you're done with that aero burn, we will then deploy all of our antennas again, and we will also deploy our solar panels. Once you have deployed everything, we will then go to our apoapsis, and then we will increase our periapsis so we're actually in an orbit and we won't enter the atmosphere next time we come around Duna. As you're about to see, I'm actually about to go over the maneuver node just a bit, but it doesn't really matter all that much as long as our burn is complete and done and our periapsis is around 62,000 meters, as you could see right there. Now we will then go to our periapsis and set another maneuver node and actually get into an orbit, one that is relatively similar on both sides. Now it is time for us to start our burn to get into a nice orbit around Duna. Now the next step for us, we need to find a relatively flat area to actually try and land on Duna. What we will do next is we will then point our ship towards the maneuver node and we will begin to speed up time and head towards it. Once you have finished the burn, you should be in a decent trajectory to actually enter the atmosphere and land on the planet. Now, once again, make sure to actually retract your solar panels and all of your antennas. We will be going no signal with Kerbal just for a bit during the 7 minutes of hell, as NASA calls it in real life, when they are landing rovers and stuff on Mars. The next step for us is we will decouple the rocket, as you can see there, and then once that is done, we will then expand our 10-meter heat shield, because that will help dissipate the heat from the actual main craft, and it will add drag so we actually slow down in the atmosphere. Make sure your ship is pointing towards retrograde, and then all we have to do now is just speed up time. Now, as you can see, we are officially in the atmosphere. There is not much we can do at the moment besides wait and let the heat shield slow us down. At the moment, we are still in the higher parts of the atmosphere. As we get into the lower altitudes now, you'll see that our meters per second are actually decreasing very, very quick. Now that we are around 200 meters per second, you can deploy the 4 drogue parachutes. Now, for some reason, when I tried to get rid of the 10-meter heat shield, my game started running at like 2 FPS, so I just had to really quick reload my game. And yeah, so all we have to do now is put our marker on retrograde. And then once we have done that, we can then move to radial out, which is that one there. So we are pointing directly up. Now, use your shift and control keys to slowly change how quick and fast you're going. Make sure your parachutes don't go down like that, because that means you are going to start moving upwards. Make sure you land nice and gently, just like that. But as you can see, I actually landed on kind of an uneven surface, so we are moving just a little bit. What you can do is right-click your landing gear and your spring strength, bring it all the way down. So we are moving much slower and our center of mass is actually lower, so we're less likely to fall over. Now it is time for us to redeploy all of our solar panels and our antennas and whatnot. Once we have deployed all of that, we can then move on to our science equipment. Look at that, look at our nice little base. Now, time to move on to reading our science stuff. So as you can see there, we can observe the mystery goo. Nothing interesting there. Then we can move on to our seismic accelerometer. There does not appear to be any significant seismic activity on the planet. It is possible that it is no longer geologically active. Then we can move on to our gravioli detector. The sensor performs a detailed and calibrated thingy of gravity and pressure. The atmosphere is pretty thin, even at the surface. You don't think parachutes or wings would work very well here. Log pressure, collected and recorded temperature data. Moving on to the next step, we need to get our engineer out, Bob, and we need to repack all of the parachutes for when we land back at Kerbal. So you want to make sure your 4 drogue parachutes and the top parachute are all put back together. Once you have done all that, we will then get our scientist out, because he will be able to analyze many different things on the planet's surface. Now, as you can see, we have Bob, which is our scientist. I have deployed our ladders. They are all working good. Now it is time for us to plant our flag and do some little science experiments. All you have to do is right-click on him and then press plant flag. Now we will write that this is the first ever Duna landing. And then we can move on to our EVA report. This surface consists of a grainy, very fine sand-like dust and appears to be getting everywhere. After much testing, you determine that red sand castles are plausible. Excellent, maybe we'll make sand castles on Duna one day. Now, take your time to roam around and see what Duna has to explore. Really, it's not much, more or less just sand and rocks. But what we will do now is we will make our way back to our little ship. Now, once again, we need to retract our solar and antennas. I know it's a bit tedious and annoying, but if you want it to burn up, then don't retract it, I suppose. Once you've retracted everything, you'll want to press Z and then press G to retract your landing gear. We will just gain a little bit of speed for now, and then we will press X in just a moment to cut throttle and then rotate our ship to head towards 90 degrees on our nav ball in the middle of our screen there. Now rotate your ship just a little bit and make sure to retract your ladder as I'm about to do right now. I should have done that earlier. But yeah, kind of just maintain this angle for now. It's basically the same type of concept as on Kerbal. I have given myself an apoapsis of about 60,000 meters or 60 kilometers. That is the orbital height that I will use. Now, just like getting into an orbit around Kerbal, you will want to place a maneuver node on your apoapsis, and then you'll want to pull the prograde marker until you see that it will flip and turn into an orbit just like that. Now, once you're done with that, we can then speed up time and make our way towards the burn. Once you're done with completing your burn, we will then head into the tracking station, as we will need to put Kerbal and Duna into a transfer point. Now that we are in the tracking station, we need to speed up time so Kerbal will be facing behind Duna. Once you have done that, we will be fully set up to go back to Kerbal in our ship. Well, if you made it this far, I'm going to assume you have a fair idea of how to return to Kerbal from Duna. So I'll let you guys figure that one out by yourself as a little challenge. Now, what you want to do is you want to set a maneuver node to about halfway on your way to Kerbal. What we will do now is do a similar thing to what we did when we were going to Duna. We're going to get an aero burn, but for this aero burn, we will fully enter the atmosphere to land. So again, what you want to do is mess around with your prograde and retrograde markers, and maybe your anti-normal and normal purple markers as well. So we'll want to aim for around 25,000 meters, 30,000 meters. That is generally a good point to enter Kerbal's atmosphere and successfully land. A quick pro tip before you commit to the burn. I highly recommend dropping your engine's thrust limiter to about 1 or 3%. I actually missed this step during my first attempt, as you'll see in the footage, which led to a few precision errors. Setting it low gives you much finer control for these delicate orbital adjustments. And as you can see, we are at about 25,000 meters. Now, all we have to do is speed up time. And as you can see, this mission went perfectly. We have 23 meters per second left of delta V. I forgot to deploy my solar panels and antennas again. So yeah, don't make the mistake that I did. Now that we are approaching our home, for the last time, we need to retract our antennas and solar panels. I promise. This is the last time. Alrighty. Now, all we can do is just watch our ship slowly make its way through Kerbal's atmosphere, and all we can do is wish for the best. So as you can see, we are on fire. But it is all good because we have our heat shield to protect us. Just try and ignore the fact that the heat shield itself is about to overheat. I don't know why it decided to do that, because normally it doesn't, but yeah, here we are entering the atmosphere. Alright, well, we have made it home safe and sound. As you can see, all of our parachutes are deployed. We are traveling at a 10 meters per second, and we are about to gracefully land on Kerbal surface. So, if this video helped you, please subscribe and please like the video. See you guys later.